Everyone laughed at the girl wearing camo to school, until the Secret Service stepped out of a limo. The moment the school bell rang and 17-year-old Lena Harper stepped into the crowded hallways wearing her worn camouflage jacket, the laughter started, snide whispers, sharp stares, and cold jokes about a girl who looked like she belonged somewhere far from a high school corridor. What no one knew was that Lena was more than just a student trying to honor a legacy. She was the granddaughter of a decorated veteran, carrying a history written in silence and sacrifice. But when the sleek black limousine pulled up and the Secret Service quietly stepped out, the room fell deadly silent. Because sometimes the quietest battles hold the fiercest truths, and the greatest strength is carried in camo, not words. Just a quick little pause before I forget. If you like this kind of stories of overcoming adversity and justice, please leave a like and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. I guarantee you won't want to miss it. Now let's jump back in. The halls of Jefferson High carried their usual Monday indifference, buzzing fluorescent lights, lockers slamming, conversations blending into a low, constant hum. Teenagers milled about in branded hoodies, jeans, and sneakers. No one paid attention to much of anything, really, until she walked in. Her name was Lena Maddox, 17, quiet, new, and wearing full camouflage BDUs. Not the costume store kind either. These were worn, real, the kind that holds the memory of sweat and soil in its fibers. Boots tied high and tight, pants bloused, a field cap tucked under one arm like it actually meant something. Which, to her, it did. Students turned. First out of curiosity, then confusion, then something colder, laughter. A group of seniors near the water fountain snorted and elbowed each other. Yo, is this some ROTC cosplay or what? I think she thinks it's Call of Duty Day. A smirk spread through the crowd like wildfire. One girl snapped a picture, whispering something that made another choke on her iced latte. Lena didn't flinch. She walked straight, spine aligned like a drawn line across a map. Her eyes didn't rise to meet anyone's, but they didn't drop either. There was weight in her silence. Not fear, but something else. Something most in that hallway couldn't name. To them, she was just another oddball. To her, this uniform wasn't about standing out. It was a promise. She reached her locker, empty, bottom row, the kind they always give to new kids, and quietly spun the combination. The hallway noise seemed to return in waves, laughter trailing off as people lost interest. But not everyone looked away. Across the hall, a science teacher paused mid-step. He studied the patches stitched onto the sleeve, subtle, faded, and real. One caught his eye, a unit insignia most students wouldn't recognize. He would. He didn't say anything, just stood there a beat too long. Then Lena shut her locker gently. No slams, no dramatics, just a breath in, and then forward motion again. Always forward. Because if she had learned one thing, it was that legacy doesn't need to shout to be heard. It walks in silence, and eventually, the world listens. Lena made her way to room 214, World History. First period. A voice echoed inside before she even reached the door. Hey, new girl. You planning to enlist during roll call? More laughter. Softer this time, but sharper. A boy leaned against the doorframe, tall, wiry, with a varsity jacket half-zipped over a careless smirk. His name was Trevor Sloan. Class clown. Quarterback. Self-declared alpha of anything that didn't require reading past a headline. She glanced at him once. That was it. Not with defiance. Not with fear. Just a flicker of assessment. Tactical. Brief. Trevor frowned, just for a second, like he didn't quite like what he saw staring back. Then he shrugged and moved aside dramatically, hand gesturing like a mock soldier salute. Ma'am, he said. After you. Inside, students were already seated, clustered by familiarity and social order. The laughter had followed Lena in before she did. And now it circled. She took the seat in the back. Always the back. Her chair didn't creak when she sat. She moved with care, like someone who'd been taught that even small sounds matter. That discipline wasn't just for the battlefield, but for everything. The teacher, Mr. Hensley, called roll. Maddox. Lena Maddox. Heads turned. Lena raised her hand once, sharp and simple, then dropped it again. Hensley paused. He knew that name. Everyone over 30 did. But he didn't say it out loud. She had her father's name. Staff Sergeant Cole Maddox. Kia. But before that, something much quieter, much deeper, classified. The kind of classified that doesn't make the news, but keeps the news from needing to be written. The kids didn't know. Not yet. To them, she was the weird girl in camo. To Mr. Hensley, she was something else entirely. He marked her present without another word. And Lena opened her book. A plain composition notebook. Black and white. On the first page, 2 names were written in neat, squared print. Cole Maddox. And the daughter who remembers. She wrote nothing else that day. She didn't need to. Because she wasn't here to explain herself. She was here to wait. Wait for the moment when truth doesn't have to be shouted. Just shown. Lena's days followed a rhythm few noticed. She moved like someone trained not to leave footprints. Not literally, but socially. She wasn't cold, just absent from the noise. Lunchtime came and went. She sat alone, not out of discomfort, but choice. In the back corner near the vending machines, she unwrapped a simple sandwich, ate slowly, thoughtfully. No phone, no scrolling, just observation. Across the cafeteria, Trevor Sloan held court like always, laughing too loud, telling stories he didn't finish because someone always cut in to one-up him. He thrived on attention. Lena barely glanced his way, but others did. By the 3rd day, a few students had tried to poke at her oddness. One girl dropped a fake recruitment flyer on her tray. "Uncle Sam wants you." To get a clue. Lena looked at it for a moment. Then, calmly, she folded it into a square, tore the corners with precise creases, and set it upright like a tiny tent. No response. No drama. Just patience. But even her silence started to gain attention. Some students whispered, "She's weird," but like, serious weird. Others watched the way she moved, how she never startled at slamming lockers or raised voices. How she kept her hands palm down on the table like it was drilled into her. Small things. Tension points. In gym class, she declined to run in the brand new Nikes others wore. She stuck with her boots. Her mile time wasn't flashy, but her breathing never changed. Not once. Coach DeMarco raised an eyebrow. "UXROTC or something?" Lena's reply came slow, measured. "No, sir." But her posture said more. Shoulders back, eyes forward, like someone raised by someone who understood chain of command, not as obedience, but as discipline. Later, in the locker room, one girl caught sight of something when Lena pulled her shirt over her head. Faint lines, diagonal, crossing her left shoulder. Not decorative, not fresh. Scars. She didn't hide them, didn't explain them either. A whisper started, then faded, because no one could figure out how to ask the question out loud. She was the new girl in camo, sure. But more and more, she didn't seem like someone playing soldier. She felt like someone trying not to be one. And that, somehow, was more unsettling. Friday morning arrived wrapped in fog and drizzle. The school announced a short flag ceremony before classes, Veterans Week tribute. Nothing elaborate, just a few student speeches, a moment of silence, and the flag raising. Trevor Sloan volunteered to lead it, naturally. "My grandpa was a Navy cook," he said proudly. "Saw some stuff in Guam or something. I'll do the speech." No one objected. Students gathered near the flagpole just after the first bell. Teachers shuffled to the side, mugs steaming. The student body clustered under umbrellas and hoodies, yawning through the drizzle. Lena stood alone, arms behind her back, palms resting on opposite wrists. Parade rest. Not textbook, but real. Lived in. Unthinking. Trevor climbed the steps, paper in hand, and began his speech. It was what you'd expect. Lines about honor, sacrifice, those who gave all, punctuated with fumbled metaphors and exaggerated bravado. A few claps followed. Someone muttered a joke about Fortnite. Then it was time to raise the flag. A freshman held the pole rope. Trevor took the flag from its case, fumbling the fold. He tried to unfold it, but dropped the corner into the wet grass. The moment cracked. A few chuckles. Someone whispered, "He just disgraced the flag." Lena didn't move. Not yet. But Mr. Hensley noticed. Her jaw clenched. Slight. Controlled. Trevor stared at the flag like it had personally betrayed him. Then Lena stepped forward. One smooth motion. No hesitation. No words. Just presence. She reached him, held out her hands. Trevor blinked. "You wanna?" She nodded once. He handed it over like a child surrendering something he knew he didn't understand. Lena knelt, lifted the muddy edge with reverence, wiped it gently with her sleeve. Then she began the fold. Triangle. Tight. Crisp, sharp corners tucked like memory itself. The crowd fell quiet. The way she moved, methodical, respectful, without performance, shifted the air. Something sacred, unspoken, reclaimed. She didn't look at the crowd. Didn't need to. Once finished, she stepped toward the pole, and the freshman instinctively handed her the rope. The flag rose. Not quickly, not theatrically, but with the slow, solemn rhythm of someone who'd seen it folded beside a casket. When she stepped back, hands clasped again behind her, the silence was total. And in that moment, Lena Maddox was no longer just the girl in camo. She was someone they hadn't yet learned how to name. By Monday, the fog had lifted, but the air inside Jefferson High remained thick with questions. Who was Lena Maddox? Some students began to wonder. Others doubled down on the jokes. Hey, Private G.I. Jane, someone whispered as she passed between classes. Gonna invade the lunchroom today? She didn't stop walking. Bet her backpack's full of MREs, another voice said behind a locker door. Or maybe live grenades. Lena opened her locker, retrieved her history book, shut the door quietly, then walked. Always walked. The comments weren't born of confidence. They were born of discomfort. Because silence, when held with certainty, unnerves the loudest voices. But Lena wasn't just quiet. She was still. And that kind of stillness comes from places most high schoolers couldn't imagine. By lunch, the snickering had grown into murmurs of spectacle. Someone dared Trevor Sloan. Ask her what unit she's in, they said, grinning. Bet she's with the special forces of make-believe. Trevor, always hungry for the crowd, took the bait. He found her by the vending machines, eating almonds out of a small pouch with that same focused posture. Hey, he said, louder than necessary. You ever shoot anything, camo girl? A few students nearby chuckled. Someone pulled out their phone. Lena looked at him. Not up. Just at, like she was triangulating something invisible. His stance. The room's exits. The echo of his words. Or is the uniform just for the drama club? He added. No reaction. Trevor stepped closer. I mean, you look the part. But I've seen TikTokers dress better for fake boot camps. Someone snorted. Another whispered, she's gonna cry. Lena didn't cry. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a folded paper, slowly unfolded it. It wasn't military ID, not even a letter. It was a photo, glossy, worn from years of handling. In it, a man in uniform knelt beside a girl. Age 6, hair tied back, face solemn, hand on her father's chest where a row of ribbons sat. Below the photo, barely visible in ink smudged by time, were 2 words. Her watch now. She didn't say a word, just held the photo for Trevor to see, then tucked it away, turned, and walked. And Trevor, for once, didn't have anything to say. Later that week, Mr. Hensley assigned a group project on the Constitution. The class groaned in unison, except Lena. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, just opened her notebook and waited for instruction. Second Amendment groups, Hensley said. Debate structure. Pro, con, historical relevance. Pick your partners. Lena didn't pick anyone. No one picked her. So Hensley assigned her a group by default. Trevor Sloan, his friend Mason, and a quiet girl named Eva Ramirez who rarely spoke above a whisper. Trevor rolled his eyes. Great. Rambo's with us. Mason grinned. She's probably got opinions. Lena just nodded once. That Friday, presentations began. Trevor's group went second. Mason fumbled with the projector. Eva stood off to the side, glancing between Lena and the screen like she wasn't sure who to follow. Trevor spoke first, of course. So, the Second Amendments, like, about having guns for protection, self-defense and stuff. Also, hunting, maybe. He clicked to the next slide. A meme appeared, clearly pulled from a Reddit thread. A cartoon figure holding 2 AR-15s, sunglasses, and a tactical vest. Pretty badass, right? Trevor grinned. Freedom, baby. Snickers from the class. Then he turned toward Lena. What do you think, Sergeant Maddox? The room froze. Trevor raised his eyebrows, waiting for the punchline to land. Lena looked at the image. Then she walked to the projector, clicked the next slide. A black and white photo filled the screen, grayscale, stark, and quiet. A folded flag resting atop a child's lap. A soldier's boots beside an empty helmet. A hand, small, gripping dog tags. Trevor looked confused. Lena finally spoke. Her voice was low, controlled, precise. My father believed in the Second Amendment, she said. But not for cosplay. Silence. He carried his rifle through 5 deployments. He didn't laugh when he trained. He didn't smile when he cleaned blood off it. And he never once, not once, called it badass. Her words weren't angry. They were something heavier. She clicked again. This time, a page from her father's field journal. Scanned. Highlighted. The rifle is not power. It is burden. Every time I lift it, I pray I never have to fire. Lena stepped back, hands behind her once more. The room stayed silent. Trevor didn't smirk. Mason didn't laugh. Even Eva stared at Lena like seeing her for the first time. Because sometimes, the loudest part of a lesson is knowing when not to speak. The days that followed held a strange quiet. No one joked about Camo anymore. Not out loud. Trevor avoided Lena in the halls, not out of fear, but discomfort, as if he'd been handed a weight he didn't ask for and didn't know how to carry. Still, some students whispered. Not all of them meant harm. But curiosity can be cruel when left unchecked. She's got to be military brat royalty or something. Did you see that picture in her project? That was her, right? With the flag. I think her dad was in, like, Delta or some Black Ops thing. None of them knew. And Lena didn't tell them. She moved through the building like a shadow at high noon, visible, but out of place. Not because she was trying to be mysterious, but because she'd learned long ago that truth doesn't need to be defended every time it's misunderstood. Instead, she trained. Every morning, 5:30 a.m., before school, alone in the woods behind her aunt's house. Trail runs with her ruckpack. Weighted vest. Tactical drills she remembered by muscle memory. A sequence she'd learned at 11. Not from YouTube. From someone who'd spent decades teaching people how to survive the worst day of their lives. She carried his name on a patch sewn into her inner collar, and his ashes in a locket that never left her neck. One morning, she stood still in the clearing after finishing her reps, breath slow, steam rising off her in the frostbit air. Her aunt, Marla Maddox, watched from the porch. Still carrying the weight? She asked gently. Lena nodded once. Marla didn't press, because she had once watched her brother carry that same silence, that same stillness. And she knew. It wasn't grief that kept Lena training. It was duty. Back at school, subtle changes were beginning. Coach DeMarco asked Lena to assist with conditioning drills for gym. Not in front of the class. Quietly. Respectfully. She nodded. No ego. Just precision. One afternoon, a student approached her hesitantly in the library. My cousin's deploying next week, he said. Marine. You think he'll be okay? Lena looked at him, then nodded once. If he's trained right, she said, he won't be thinking about okay. He'll be thinking about everyone else. The student blinked, then slowly nodded back. A new kind of silence followed Lena now. Not discomfort. Respect. The kind earned. 1 inch at a time. It was the first real cold snap of the season. Students huddled in thicker hoodies, griping about how early the heaters kicked in and how their coffees were already cold before second period. Lena didn't seem to notice. She wore the same BDUs. Same boots. Her jacket was heavier now, military fleece, patches velcroed off. Nothing flashy, nothing labeled, but unmistakably issued. She sat alone on a bench during break. Outside, in the cold, notebook on her lap, pencil between her fingers, tapping against her thigh in a rhythm only she understood. Some students glanced her way. One tried to joke, she's doing recon on squirrels. It didn't land. No one laughed this time. Inside, Eva Ramirez watched from the window. Then, quietly, gathered her things and stepped out into the chill. She didn't say anything when she reached Lena, just sat beside her. 2 girls in near silence. One still, the other unsure. Lena didn't look up, but she didn't move away either. Eva cleared her throat. My uncle was in the Navy. I didn't know him much. But I have his tags. Lena nodded once. Not out of politeness. Out of understanding. After a moment, she spoke, soft, deliberate. Were them? Eva hesitated. Sometimes. Then you know. Eva tilted her head. Know what? Lena looked over. That weight never leaves. You either learn to stand with it, or it crushes your spine. Eva went quiet, then whispered, You still carry yours? Lena's hand went instinctively to her collarbone, where the locket rested under layers. Every day, she said. A gust of wind cut through the courtyard. Lena reached into her pack and pulled out an extra fleece, plain, dark. No insignias. She held it out to Eva. Eva blinked. You don't have to. But Lena had already draped it across the bench beside her. Not a gesture of charity. of camaraderie, like handing off half the load. That afternoon, when they returned to class, Eva wore the fleece. No one commented, but Mr. Hensley saw, and so did Coach DeMarco. The teachers had been around long enough to know what quiet loyalty looked like, what unit looked like. It wasn't forged in matching outfits or inside jokes. It was found on cold benches, in shared silence, between those who understood that service wasn't a job. It was a language. She remembered the sound of her father's boots long before she remembered his voice. Cole Maddox never slammed doors, never raised his voice. But when he entered a room, something shifted, like gravity, quiet and certain. Lena used to try and walk like him when she was little, mimicking his stride across the hardwood floor, her tiny boots slapping awkwardly until he'd scoop her up with one arm and whisper, "Quiet feet." Always. Even when you're proud. She hadn't understood what that meant until much later. After the knock on the door. After the folded flag. After the world became heavier than any child should have to carry. She was 11 the last time he hugged her. 12 when the uniform came home without him. And 14 when she found the lockbox. Her aunt had told her not to open it. Said it was best left closed. That the past had already taken enough. But Lena waited until one night when the grief became too loud to ignore, and the silence in her room felt like a stranger. Inside, the contents were few, but sacred. A worn photo, his last field journal, a patch from a unit she'd never heard him speak of, one knife, one locket, and a letter, addressed to her, sealed with the wax imprint of an old insignia. She never told her aunt she read it, but she had, hundreds of times. If you're reading this, I didn't make it back. But that doesn't mean you're alone. Everything I ever was, I've poured into you. You don't need to become a soldier. You already are, of a different kind. Quiet, precise, watchful, kind where it counts, ruthless only when necessary, and always with purpose. She slept with that letter under her pillow for 3 years, and trained every morning without fail. Not for vengeance, not for show, but because she believed, in her marrow, that legacy wasn't what people left behind. Legacy was what you carried forward. Now, at 17, as she walked the halls of a high school filled with noise and laughter and pretense, Lena carried it in her spine, in the way she folded paper, in how she never interrupted. And sometimes, at night, she would open the journal, run her fingers over the last page he ever wrote, and whisper one word into the dark. Still here. Lena sat at her desk that night, light low, notebook open in front of her. The room was spare, just a bed, a folded blanket on the footboard, a corkboard with pinned maps, a compass, and a few faded photographs. One of them was taped to the upper corner of her mirror. Her father in uniform, crouched beside her, her 5-year-old hands clutching his ID badge like it was treasure. She never cried when she looked at it, but sometimes she talked to it. Not out loud, just on paper. She picked up her pencil and began to write. The page was already dated. She always dated them, a habit inherited from him. Dear Dad. The words came slow, not hesitant, careful. They laughed at me again today, not as loud this time. I think they're starting to feel it, like something's off, but they don't know what. They don't know about you, or what I'm trying to carry. I'm not sure they'd understand if they did. She paused. The pencil hovered, then moved again. One of them, Trevor, mocked the flag during a presentation. He didn't mean it, not really. But he doesn't get it. The weight of it. The blood behind the fabric. I wanted to yell, but I remembered what you told me. Power doesn't always raise its voice. So I showed them your words instead. From the journal. I think it hit him. Not like a punch. More like a mirror. She exhaled slowly. The memory of that quiet room. The faces stunned into silence, still warm in her chest. Sometimes I want to disappear. Not because I'm ashamed, just tired. It's hard being your shadow in a place where no one sees shadows. Just reflections of who they expect you to be. But I hear your steps behind me when I walk through that cafeteria. When I fold my jacket at the end of the day. When I sleep facing the door. Another pause. Longer this time. There's a ceremony at school next week. Rumor is someone important showing up. Secret Service maybe. Some kind of delegation for Veterans Honor Day. I'm supposed to wear something respectful. She looked over at her closet. The BDUs hung on one side. On the other, a plain dress she hadn't worn in years. I'll wear the camo. If they laugh again, that's fine. I'm not here for them. I'm here because you couldn't be. She signed it without her name. Just, still your daughter. then folded the letter and slid it into the locket's hollow backside, where it belonged. Veterans Honor Day arrived under a heavy, overcast sky, the kind of gray that presses down on your chest and dulls the edges of everything. The school auditorium buzzed with a mix of nervous excitement and obligatory respect. Teachers stood near the stage, students filtered into their seats, their conversations low and uneven, as if unsure how to honor a legacy they only half understood. Lena arrived last, her footsteps quiet but deliberate. She wore her camouflage BDUs, worn but meticulously cared for, boots polished until they caught the dim auditorium lights. The uniform wasn't the formal dress her peers wore to impress, but a statement all the same. She held her field cap carefully, fingers wrapped around its edge like it was a talisman. The moment she stepped inside, the room shifted. Eyes that had barely spared her a glance now lingered. A ripple of whispers spread, starting softly before rising into a low hum. Why is she wearing that here? Is she serious? Trevor Sloan sat near the front, visibly uncomfortable. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by a frown that tightened his jaw. He caught Lena's eyes for a brief moment. She didn't flinch. Instead, she met his gaze with the same calm that had unsettled him before. No anger, no apology, just presence. The principal took the stage and began his speech. It was the usual mix of solemn words about sacrifice, honor, and gratitude. Applause followed, polite but lacking real warmth. Then, almost on cue, the quiet was pierced by the low rumble of an engine outside. The auditorium doors swung open, and a sleek black limousine glided inside, followed by a small, formal group of Secret Service agents. Their entrance commanded immediate silence. The crowd's murmurs died mid-word. Heads turned, eyes widening as the agents moved through the aisles with purposeful steps. The agents scanned the crowd, their gazes sharp, calculating. Then, as if pulled by an invisible thread, one agent's eyes settled on Lena. Whispers rose again, but this time with a different weight. Curiosity edged with respect, surprise tinged with recognition. Is that? She looks just like him. Trevor's earlier confidence crumbled entirely, replaced by stunned silence. The lead agent stepped forward, holding out an official ID badge, its metallic sheen catching the light. The insignia of the Secret Service gleamed above a name, Cole Maddox. Beneath it, the title, Veteran and Honored Service Member. The room seemed to hold its breath. Lena's lips parted slightly, not to claim anything, but to silently acknowledge the truth carried in that small, cold badge. The girl in camouflage was no longer just the quiet outsider. She was the living legacy of sacrifice, discipline, and quiet strength. And in that moment, the laughter that had once followed her like a shadow fell away, replaced by an overwhelming, reverent silence. The auditorium remained suspended in silence long after the agents had taken their places near the stage. Lena stood, the soft fabric of her uniform slightly rustling with the faintest movement, a quiet contrast to the thick stillness that filled the room. Eyes that only moments ago had mocked her now held something unfamiliar: respect, uncertainty, even awe. The laughter that had echoed through the halls like a cruel chorus had vanished, replaced by a reverence born not of words, but of presence. Trevor Sloan's face was pale, his usual bravado replaced by a silence that felt like an admission. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but did not speak. The others looked to one another, searching for a signal, a cue to break the spell, but found none. Mr. Hensley stepped forward. His voice, calm and steady, broke the silence. Today, we honor not just the men and women who served, but the legacies they leave behind. The strength passed quietly from one generation to the next. He gestured subtly toward Lena. This is Lena Maddox, daughter of Staff Sergeant Cole Maddox, who gave everything for his country. And though she walks these halls as a student, her courage and resilience speak louder than any uniform ever could. A gentle applause began, small at first, then growing steadily as others rose to their feet. The Secret Service agents nodded respectfully, their eyes never leaving Lena. She did not rise to accept the recognition. Instead, she lowered her gaze slightly, hands folded calmly before her. It was not pride that filled the room. It was the profound silence of understanding, the kind that honors sacrifice without fanfare, that recognizes strength not through words, but through unwavering presence. Outside, the rain had begun to fall softly, washing away the remnants of disbelief and mockery. Inside, Lena Maddox reclaimed her place, not as a symbol, nor as a spectacle, but as a quiet testament to the weight of history carried with dignity. And for the first time in a long while, the girl in camo was seen, truly seen. The moment the Secret Service agents moved through the auditorium, the atmosphere shifted instantly. They didn't speak or make announcements. Instead, their presence alone commanded attention, calm, disciplined, unyielding. They formed a protective formation around Lena, who rose slowly from her seat. Her uniform, faded but meticulously maintained, rested on her shoulders with quiet gravity. Every movement she made was measured, each step forward echoing a lifetime of silent discipline and inherited legacy. The crowd watched in stunned silence as she walked between the rows, the agents flanking her like shadows cast from a shared history. Trevor Sloan sat frozen, his bravado stripped away in the face of undeniable truth. The whispers that had once mocked her had vanished, replaced by an uneasy respect that none dared voice aloud. Outside, the rain softened to a light drizzle, casting a reflective sheen over the pavement. The sleek black limousine waited just beyond the doors, its polished surface gleaming under the gray sky. One agent reached out and opened the door smoothly, signaling Lena to step inside. At the threshold, Lena paused, turning slowly to face the crowd. Her eyes scanned the silent auditorium, not with pride or defiance, but with a quiet acknowledgement of everything she carried within, the weight of loss, the burden of legacy, and the resilience born from both. Her gaze met Trevor's for a fleeting moment, his lips pressed into a thin line, no longer mocking, but subdued. With no words exchanged, she slipped into the limo. The door closed behind her with a soft thud, sealing her in from the world that had both doubted and underestimated her. The agents followed, forming a protective barrier around the vehicle. As the limousine pulled away, its tires whispering on the wet asphalt, Lena settled back into the seat. The weight of the past pressed against her, but in this moment, she allowed herself a quiet breath. Her fingers brushed against the locket resting at her collar, a small keepsake carrying her father's ashes and the letter she never sent. On the dashboard sat a framed photograph of her father in uniform, standing tall beside a folded flag. Lena's hand reached out, tracing the image lightly as she whispered, "Still here." Back inside the school, the auditorium remained filled with a profound silence, the kind born not from absence, but from the reverberations of truth finally unveiled. The girl in camo had silenced the room, not with noise or spectacle, but through the power of presence, history, and unspoken dignity. The limousine's tires whispered away on the rain-slick pavement, leaving behind a silence that seemed to settle over the entire school like a heavy fog. Inside the auditorium, that silence deepened into something heavier, an invisible weight pressing on every shoulder. Every whispered conversation, every glance exchanged between students and faculty. Trevor Sloan sat frozen in his seat, his mind racing back through the last days. The taunts he'd thrown at Lena, the mocking laughter that had once echoed through the hallways, now felt hollow, empty. The moment when the Secret Service agents had appeared, when the badge with his father's name was shown to the crowd, had changed everything. It was no longer about a girl in camo who kept to herself. It was about the quiet, unwavering legacy she carried and the sacrifice woven into her very being. Nearby, Eva Ramirez tugged on a friend's sleeve, her voice barely audible but filled with awe. "Did you see? That was real. Not a joke. Not some cosplay. She carries it in her blood. In her bones." Across the room, Mr. Hensley adjusted his glasses, eyes glistening with unshed emotion. He had witnessed countless student assemblies, but rarely had a single story spoken so loudly in its silence. Lena's presence, the way she held herself, was a living testament, not just to the history of war, but to the resilience of those who bear its unseen burdens. As the assembly began to break, small groups of students approached Lena's now empty seat. One by one, they laid down tokens, a neatly folded flag, a handwritten note, a solitary white rose. No grand gestures, no loud proclamations, just quiet symbols of respect, apology, and recognition. In the hallways, the atmosphere shifted in subtle, irreversible ways. Conversations began to include Lena's name, spoken with a new reverence. The girl who had once passed through unnoticed was now quietly becoming a legend in their midst. No one said it outright. No one shouted it across classrooms or on social media. But the message resonated clearly. True strength is not loud. It does not demand applause. It exists in silence, in presence, in the unyielding dignity of those who have given everything and ask for nothing. Lena did not seek this recognition. She did not crave it. She simply carried on, steady, composed, and unbowed. Her legacy no longer hidden, but a living, breathing truth walking the halls she called home. The days following Veterans Honor Day unfolded with an uneasy calm. The laughter that once chased Lena through the halls had evaporated, replaced by an almost reverent silence. Whispers of respect and curiosity mingled quietly among students and faculty alike. Yet Lena herself remained unchanged, steady and unassuming, carrying her legacy as if it were second skin, neither seeking recognition nor shying away from it. One afternoon, Coach DeMarco called her to the gym. It was unannounced and unexpected. A small, closed gathering had formed near the makeshift shooting range set up in the school's multipurpose room. Word spread fast. Some students came out of skepticism, others from genuine curiosity. Trevor Sloan found himself among the crowd, torn between doubt and a reluctant fascination. The range was simple, targets pinned to the far wall, a faint hum of ventilation filling the quiet space. Lena stepped forward, wearing her camouflage uniform once again, her posture relaxed yet alert. Every movement was deliberate, the embodiment of discipline passed down through years of silent training. Her first shot cracked sharply in the still air, the bullet hitting the bullseye with perfect precision. Without hesitation, she fired again, another clean hit. Shot after shot followed, each one steady, controlled, exact. There was no showmanship, no dramatic gestures or bravado. Only the quiet efficiency of someone who had trained for moments that mattered, far beyond the walls of a high school gym. The crowd watched in stunned silence, the weight of what they witnessed settling heavily on their shoulders. This was not a performance. This was real. The legacy of a soldier, of a family who had sacrificed more than most could imagine, lived in this quiet teenager's steady hands. When she finally lowered the rifle, Lena glanced across the room, her voice soft but steady. "Strength isn't about loud victories or empty boasts," she said. "It's about control, knowing when to act, when to wait, and always carrying the weight of responsibility." No applause followed. No cheers. Just a silence thick with understanding. Afterward, Trevor approached her, his usual swagger replaced by humility. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "I doubted you. I'm sorry." Lena nodded once, a faint, almost imperceptible smile gracing her lips. In that moment, the girl in camo was no longer invisible. She wasn't just seen. She was understood. The corridors of the school had subtly transformed. Where once the murmur of mockery had filled the air, now a quieter, more profound respect hung like a tangible presence. Lena's existence within those walls was no longer a mere footnote or passing shadow. She had become a force, quiet yet undeniable. Students who had barely glanced her way now watched with a mixture of curiosity and awe. The hesitant whispers that fluttered through classrooms carried a different tone, less judgment, more recognition. Teachers exchanged glances filled with unspoken understanding, sensing the birth of a story that transcended ordinary high school drama. Trevor Sloan, once the loudest voice of derision, found himself wrestling with unfamiliar feelings. The bravado that had shielded him felt fragile, crumbling in the face of undeniable proof. Lena's quiet strength, her unshakable composure, dismantled every preconception he had held. For the first time, he truly saw her, not as a target, but as something much greater. During lunch, a small group of students gathered near the benches. The air was different, charged with a new kind of respect. Lena sat alone for a moment, absorbed in a book, the silence around her no longer cold but peaceful. Eva Ramirez approached quietly and settled beside her, the extra fleece still wrapped protectively around her shoulders. "They're talking about you," Eva said softly, her voice tinged with awe. Lena looked up, meeting her friend's gaze with steady eyes. "I know. They say you're not just a legacy. Eva continued. You're a force. Silent but unstoppable. A brief, almost imperceptible smile flickered across Lena's lips. That's the goal. Later, in history class, Mr. Hensley paused mid-lecture, his voice lowering into a reflective tone. Legacy isn't about medals or bloodlines, he said quietly, locking eyes with Lena. It's about character forged in silence, strength carried without fanfare. The room sank into a heavy silence, the weight of his words settling like a benediction over the students. That afternoon, as Lena gathered her things, Trevor approached her with an unguarded sincerity. Thank you, he said simply, for showing me what it really means. Lena nodded, calm and composed. It wasn't for you. It was for her. She tapped lightly over her heart. For all of us who carry it in silence. In that moment, the school, the crowd, recognized not just the girl in camo, but the quiet, unyielding force she had always been. A legacy honored not with noise or spectacle, but through presence, dignity, and unwavering strength. The days that followed Veterans Honor Day carried a subtle but unmistakable change in the school's atmosphere. Lena's presence was no longer met with whispers of mockery or glances filled with dismissal. Instead, quiet nods and respectful looks accompanied her steps through the crowded hallways. It was as if the invisible weight she carried, the legacy of sacrifice and resilience, had finally settled visibly upon her shoulders, commanding an unspoken respect. Students who had once regarded her as an oddity now regarded her with a mix of curiosity and reverence. Conversations shifted, not about rumors or gossip, but about the strength it took to carry such a burden silently. Even the most skeptical peers found themselves reconsidering their assumptions, understanding that Lena's camouflage uniform was far more than fabric. It was a symbol of a story deeper than any of them could have guessed. Among these students was Trevor Sloan, whose loud laughter and harsh words had once echoed through the halls like a challenge. Now, he passed Lena without a hint of arrogance or disdain. Instead, he carried a quiet humility, a respect born not from submission, but from a genuine recognition of what he had witnessed. The bravado that once defined him had been dismantled by the undeniable truth Lena embodied. In the teacher's lounge, Mr. Hensley spoke softly to colleagues about Lena's story. His voice was low, almost reverent, as he reflected on the unseen burdens some students bear. She carries a history that most don't see, he said quietly. The kind of strength forged in silence and sacrifice commands respect without a single word spoken. Back in the school, Lena continued to move through her days with the same quiet composure she had always had. Her eyes held the depth of someone who understood that true power was not found in loud proclamations or overt displays, but in presence, discipline, and restraint. One late afternoon, as the sun cast long, golden shadows across the courtyard, Lena sat alone on a bench. The fading light softened the edges of the world. Eva Ramirez approached and settled beside her, pulling the extra fleece around her own shoulders. Everyone's talking, Eva said gently, her voice carrying warmth and awe. About you. About what you represent now. Lena's gaze remained steady, distant, but calm. I don't need their words, she replied softly. I carry it with me every day. Eva smiled, her eyes reflecting the setting sun. But it's more than that now. You've changed how they see things, how they see you. Lena nodded slowly, the smallest hint of a smile touching her lips. It's not about me. It never was. A silence settled between them, a quiet, shared understanding. Some stories are told not with noise or grand gestures, but in the space between words, in presence, and in the enduring weight of dignity. As dusk deepened into night, the schoolyard emptied. Lena rose, adjusted her jacket, and walked away, not as the girl who had once been laughed at, but as one who had reclaimed her honor through truth, resilience, and silent strength. The days that followed felt like the slow settling of dust after a storm, subtle, inevitable, and cleansing. Lena walked the halls of her school with a calmness that had been missing for so long. The tension that had once tightened her chest with every step had softened into a steady, unshakable rhythm, a heartbeat rooted in quiet truth and self-acceptance. Her camouflage uniform, once a target of ridicule, now rested on her shoulders like a well-earned mantle. It was no longer a symbol of difference, but one of resilience, discipline, and legacy. Teachers noticed it first, the way she carried herself during class, the focused intensity in her eyes, the quiet confidence that required no words. Classmates began to see her not as the camouflage girl, but as someone who embodied a strength deeper than any superficial label. One late afternoon, after the last bell had rung and the halls had emptied, Lena found herself alone in the school library. The fading sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows that danced gently across the rows of books. She pulled from her backpack a small, worn leather journal, its edges frayed from years of careful handling. Opening it, she saw her father's handwriting, words penned in a steady hand, full of lessons learned in the silence of service, sacrifices made away from headlines and crowds. The pages were filled with reminders of honor, duty, and the invisible burdens carried by those who serve. Her fingers traced the words slowly, a quiet reverence in each movement. She remembered the nights her father spent writing in that journal, the times he shared small stories, never boasting, always teaching. This journal was more than paper and ink. It was a tangible connection to the past, a beacon guiding her forward. A soft sigh escaped her lips. In that moment, Lena understood what she truly carried. It was not just bloodline or uniform, but the weight of history and the strength to bear it without complaint. Closing the journal, she felt a profound calm. The world outside might never fully grasp the depth of her burden, but she had made peace with it. The camouflage was no longer armor to shield her from the world. It was a mantle of honor she bore with quiet dignity. She stood and looked out the window, watching the courtyard bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. With the journal tucked safely under her arm, Lena stepped forward into the fading light, steadfast, dignified, and unbroken. The afternoon sun dipped low, casting a warm, amber glow that softened the hard edges of the school courtyard. The air carried a subtle chill, signaling the approach of evening, but Lena walked steadily, her boots echoing softly against the worn pavement. Around her, students mingled, their laughter and conversations floating lightly on the breeze, normalcy returning in waves after the storm of recent days. Eva kept pace beside her, the soft fleece draped over her shoulders catching the light like a quiet shield against the cool air. The two moved together in companionable silence, two young women intertwined by shared experience, by the invisible threads of history and legacy wrapped tightly around their lives. As they neared the flagpole, a small group had gathered, a mix of students, teachers, and staff. Mr. Hensley stood at the center, his posture solemn but steady. In his hands, he cradled a folded flag, its crisp, precise folds speaking volumes of respect and remembrance. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air, thick with meaning beyond words. Lena slowed, feeling the eyes of the gathering settle on her. Her breath remained even, her composure unwavering. This was no longer a moment of judgment or doubt. It was a silent acknowledgement of sacrifice, of the legacies carried by those who walk with quiet strength. Mr. Hensley stepped forward, his voice calm, yet filled with emotion as he addressed the crowd. For those who have given everything, and for the legacies they leave behind. He extended the flag toward Lena, the gesture deliberate, respectful. She reached out, her fingers closing around the fabric with reverence, feeling the weight not just of cloth but of history, honor, and sacrifice. The crowd remained silent, each person present absorbing the gravity of the moment. No applause erupted, no cheers broke the stillness. Only a shared understanding that this simple exchange was profound beyond words. Lena's gaze lifted briefly, catching Trevor Sloane's eyes across the gathering. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by a look of unguarded sincerity, a silent apology, and a heartfelt recognition woven into a single glance. No words passed between them. None were needed. In moments like these, the deepest truths are conveyed not through speech but through presence. A look, a gesture, a shared understanding that transcends language. With the flag secured under her arm, Lena turned slowly away from the crowd. The fading light wrapped around her like a cloak, and the camouflage she wore now marked her not as an outsider, but as a bearer of dignity and honor reclaimed. And as she walked toward the quiet streets beyond the school, the girl in camo carried with her the respect she had earned, silent, resolute, and unbreakable. Twilight draped the town in deep shades of orange, purple, and soft blue, the day quietly slipping away beneath the rising stars. Lena stood at the edge of the school grounds, the flag tucked securely beneath her arm, a symbol now transformed. It was no longer merely a piece of cloth folded with precision. It was a testament to sacrifice, to resilience, to a legacy carried silently yet powerfully. Around her, the world hummed back into its usual rhythm. Students drifted home, their laughter and chatter filling the cool evening air. Teachers packed up their belongings, staff locked doors, and the bustle of daily life reclaimed the spaces that only hours before had held an unspoken tension. But Lena remained still, anchored by a rare moment of solitude and reflection. Her camouflage uniform, once a target of mockery and misunderstanding, now felt like a second skin, not worn for spectacle, nor for rebellion, but as an emblem of everything she had endured and overcome. Each thread carried the weight of history, a history filled with unspoken battles, quiet sacrifices, and lessons passed down through generations. Reaching into her pocket, Lena withdrew a small dog tag, the one her father had given her before his last deployment. The metal was worn smooth from years of careful handling, a tactile connection to the man she had loved and lost. Holding it in the palm of her hand, she closed her eyes, whispering a vow only she could hear. To honor his memory, to carry forward the strength he had instilled in her, and to walk her path with dignity and courage, no matter what the future held. The breeze stirred gently, rustling the leaves at her feet and carrying with it a quiet peace, a silent acknowledgement from the past that her journey was understood and not forgotten. It was a benediction offered in the language of wind and shadow. As darkness deepened, Lena took a deep breath and let it out slowly, feeling the steady beat of her heart beneath the fabric of her uniform. No longer was she the girl who had been laughed at, dismissed, or underestimated. She was something far greater, a quiet force shaped by resilience, honor, and unyielding strength. She turned away from the school grounds, stepping toward the familiar streets of her neighborhood. Her silhouette was steady against the fading light, a figure defined not by noise or spectacle, but by presence and purpose. Each step carried the weight of a legacy reclaimed, not through loud declarations, but through the quiet, unbreakable dignity of one who has faced the world's judgments and emerged unbowed. Her story was no longer hidden. It had been told, in the way she moved, in the way she carried herself, in the silent respect she inspired. The girl in camo had transformed into a symbol of quiet strength and enduring honor. And as she walked into the night, the world around her seemed to whisper a truth she already knew deep in her bones. Some legacies are not just inherited, they are earned. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive tactical stories.